I am so thrilled and honored here at Jane Unchained Live Talk to introduce my dear friend, my colleague across the pond in London, Robbie Lockie, who is one of the driving forces behind the incredible plant-based news. And now he has World Plant Milk Day. Tell us all about it.
Jane, what a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me. So World Plant Milk Day was an opportunity to educate people about the wonders and benefits of plant milk. 3 years ago, I saw there was a worldwide promo for Milk Day, which was obviously celebrating dairy milk. And I thought, well, why the heck isn't there a plant milk celebration? And we actually did it the first year on the same day as World Dairy Day, but actually decided to switch it to August 22nd, which is actually also Earth Overshoot Day, which we'll talk about a bit as well in a bit. But World Plant Milk Day is just an opportunity for people to go to a website, sign up and do a 7-day dairy-free challenge and to learn all about the wonders and benefits, health benefits, environmental benefits of choosing plant milk over dairy.
Well, we've got a little video here we'd like to show you. You have so many incredible videos online, but this tells the story of World Plant Milk Day in a couple of seconds.
World Plant Milk Day is a day dedicated to celebrating plant milks and encouraging people to switch from dairy and opt for plant-based alternatives. So why should you take the 7-day dairy-free challenge? Expect to experience increased energy, less bloating, improved digestion, clearer skin, reduced asthma symptoms, and other lasting health benefits. The dairy industry is also a major contributor to the unnecessary pressures humans place on the planet. It is a significant source of greenhouse gas emissions and water pollution, in addition to taxing our natural land and water resources. We can dramatically reduce our environmental footprint by switching to a plant-based alternative. When you sign up to the pledge, you'll receive daily emails packed with recipes, tips, and tricks on how to live dairy-free.
All right, I absolutely love that. So what's happening across the pond? You're in London. It's really early here, but it's late afternoon there. What is happening with the dairy-free vegan movement across the pond?
Well, the dairy-free movement is absolutely exploding. If we go forward in time to some recent predictions by GFI, the Good Food Institute, they've pitched the plant milk market to exceed $21 billion by 2024. So it really just shows how the demand for these alternatives, or what we're now calling upgrades, is just exploding.
And you see here's a sad story where most of these calves, the boys, they don't need them. They just kill them. Even a minority go to veal crates. Most are just shot or thrown on a dead pile and left to die. The stories about the cruelty in the dairy industry are really rising because of social media. You won't see it on mainstream TV, where all you're going to see is meat, dairy, and these indigestion commercials. And so many people are suffering from indigestion. And honestly, I can't even watch television. I have to turn the commercials off because if I'm having dinner or something, it's too disgusting. Is everybody suffering from horrible intestinal problems? How is that connected to dairy?
I mean, dairy is a highly acidic substance, and when we consume it, it can cause a lot of havoc with our gut. I think some 60+% of people are lactose intolerant, but when we are weaned off our mother's breast, we're then introduced to dairy milk, which is obviously the breast milk of a female animal. So we go from being addicted to our mother's breast, which is what the process weaning is. You have to wean a child from the breast, and then we give our children dairy milk, which is obviously, it is evolved for feeding baby cows, which can grow up into these huge mammals. And a lot of people don't realize that when we consume dairy milk, it's very, very high in substances like casein, which when we consume, it's a kind of protein. And then when we consume it, it goes into our gut and becomes a casomorphine, which is like an opiate. And that's what gives cheese its addictive and moreish quality. And that's why a lot of food producers put so much whey and dairy products into food, because it actually gives it that moreish and addictive quality. So, dairy dairy is for cows, it's not for humans. But somewhere along human history, we've realized that it's actually a very lucrative opportunity, and humans have become entirely addicted to it. And, you know, World Plant Milk Days are all about educating people and helping them realize and understand that, you know, there are alternatives, or upgrades, as I keep calling them at the moment. I hate the word alternative, because it isn't an alternative. It's a totally different product. And it has so many benefits, whereas dairy just doesn't.
Now, you've been doing this for several years. Give us the backstory of how it's grown, because you're a powerhouse. I run into you at animal rights conferences and various places. You're always moving. You remind me of me a little bit. We're both always moving, but you are doing so many things across the board. Incredible work with Klaus Mitchell, no relation, but a dear friend, who is also one of the forces behind Plant-Based News, which is growing exponentially. And now you're also doing this big project. How has the dairy-free challenge gone?
So when we first started, it was just myself and a designer helping me with some content. And actually, we had an incredible first year. We reached 30 million people using Twitter with an app called Thunderclap, which was this really great tool where you went on and you put in a caption, and loads of people joined. I think we had over 2,000 people join us. And on a specific time on August 22nd, Twitter fired out these thousands of messages, and we ended up trending worldwide for about 20 minutes for hashtag World Plant Milk Day. The subsequent years have been a lot harder, because there's a lot more tipped against us when it comes to social media algorithms. We have found it quite hard to get the message out there. We're very fortunate this year to get some funding and support to help with promo and messaging. But, you know, it's been great. We've just seen so many people sharing. We recently launched our filter on Instagram, so the face filter, and I think it only went live yesterday, and I think it's been used some 20,000 times, and it's been viewed 50,000 times. So people are starting to get the message. And if you're on Instagram and your Facebook, please just use the hashtag World Plant Milk Day if you want to share pictures of you drinking your dairy-free latte or your dairy-free cheese, eating your dairy-free cheese.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is fantastic. And, you know, I read all these articles about the dairy industry circling the drain and collapsing. And I just read one last night. Every time I go on and check my news sources in the morning, there's another story about dairy in trouble. And I think the reasons are numerous. It's multi-determined. First of all, you have kids that are not in school, so they're not being force-fed cow's milk. Because in some districts here, many of them, most if not, you have to actually present a doctor's note in order to get soy milk or rice milk or hemp milk or cashew milk. I mean, that's outrageous, absolutely outrageous. Or oat milk, my new fave.
It's given us default to children.
Yeah, I mean, it really is one of the primary ways that they push it. And so that's one of the reasons I think that the governments are pushing people to get back to school, because they need to sell all this bad stuff. Their cheese caves, which they buy up extra cheese and they store it. It's really not capitalism. It's corporate socialism that they're propping this industry up. And yet, despite that, they're still suffering because consumers are making different choices. I see it all the time. I'm here in Los Angeles, you're in London, but every time I don't go to the grocery store now, I use Instacart. But when I would go to the grocery store, I'd see that the plant-based milk section is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And that I would look when I'm standing online, I'd see the person in front of me's got plant-based milk. It was more frequent. I could see the changes right in front of me. And I think the pandemic has accelerated that because people want to store things. So you can take soy milk and you can put a whole bunch of boxes of soy milk and put it in your closet and have it there for a long time. So what are you seeing in London, which has been voted a couple of times now the most vegan friendly city, even eclipsing the incredibly vegan Berlin? What are you seeing in London vis-a-vis consumers making these choices?
I mean, just like in the US, we're seeing a huge explosion of plant milk alternatives in the aisles. When I first went vegan some 7 years ago, I think there was just soy milk and maybe almond milk. But now there's almond milk and soy milk and rice milk and potato milk and peanut milk and amaranth milk and coconut milk. There's just so much choice. And the prices are coming down as well, economies of scale. Oatly, which is one of the world's leading oat milk brands, I think their business was just recently valued at $1 billion. The first time a vegan company, a plant milk company, is now, as we call in the business world, a unicorn. It's exploded. They are not able to keep up.
Talk for a second while I grab my Oatly, which I just had in coffee this morning. I want to show the box.
Yeah, so it's a wonderful brand, and I think more and more plant-based milk companies are starting to play on the idea of sort of challenging the dairy industry, and Oatly has been very good at that. They've been very good at poking fun at the dairy industry. They had a huge advertising campaign that was across Europe that said, "We make milk for humans." And it kind of like played on that idea that, traditional milk or dairy milk is actually milk for cows, but somehow humans ended up drinking it and becoming hooked on it. So
yeah. Oatly has, I think, one of the cleverest advertising campaigns I've ever seen. And in fact, it was when I was in Berlin 2 years ago that I saw my first Oatly ad. They were all over. Oatly was literally all over Berlin. See this? Giant. The entire side of a building would have, and they were clever. Another side of our packaging providing no reason at all why you should try this product. So funny and hip and clever. And also talking about their beliefs, really, really. And then they're just so clever. Look, the boring side.
Yeah. And talking about the environmental impact of dairy as well, and how the effect of, I think oat milk is about 1/10 of the environmental impact of dairy. The BBC recently covered an infographic. Well, they shared an infographic about the differences in dairy, because often people come at us on social media and say, well, you vegans and your almond milk, and you vegans and your soy milk. But, dairy eclipses plant-based milk in the way it damages the environment, the CO2 that's produced and the carbon that's produced in the water. For every 1 gallon of dairy milk that you consume, it's about 1,000 gallons of water to produce it. So, the writing is on the wall for dairy, and I think, as you said earlier, it is circling the drain because it's not sustainable. When there's so many wonderful alternatives or upgrades, it's really a no-brainer for most people these days.
We're talking to the amazing Robbie Lockie of PlantBasedNews, and also the founder of this incredible program, World Plant Milk Day. Now, if you're already plant-based, get somebody else that needs to make this shift to make it. Invite other people. Just go to worldplantmilkday.com, copy that link, and send it to your friends who need to go dairy-free. Because, they're running scared. Here's some other, I just want to show, I do like cashew milk. It's very creamy, and I use this as well. And it's, look, only 25 calories. And then the other one, here's the old-fashioned hippy-dippy one, which is also really good, West soy.
Mm.
Yeah, so I have 3 different types of soy milk.
The milks are different for different things, because the acidity of the beverage, so the coffee or the tea, is going to react differently with the milk. If you put unsweetened almond milk in tea or coffee, it can often split and separate, and that can create a bit of a negative reaction for people who are trying it for the first time. But there is a lot of new brands and products like Oatly that have something called Oatly Barista, which is an oat milk, but it has got a slight blend of some fats in it, some plant fats that actually keep the milk together, so that when you put it into your coffee, it gives it that lovely creamy taste. You can also froth it as well, so if you want your lovely frothy latte or cappuccino. So they are different milks for different things. Soy milk is great in cereal and in teas. Almond milk is great for baking. So there's so much opportunity and variety.
Absolutely. And I sent you an article the other day. We have to be smart when we read articles, because a lot of them are plants from the industry that have a way of getting these articles planted, because they have the top PR people. And it said, for the environment, there's some phony environmental group in England saying, for the environment, consume dairy because, that soy is really, destroying the planet. The horror of that, the deceptiveness of that is, guess what? 70% of all soy grown is fed to factory farm animals.
Yeah,
the amount of soy that's actually used to create soy milk is minuscule compared to the amount of soy that's fed to cows to produce dairy. So that was so incredibly deceptive. To me, it had to be an industry that, there's now these phony environmental groups that are fronts for industry that are coming out with, because they're running scared. Can you address all this?
Yeah, so in the US, there's something called the Center for Consumer Freedom, which was set up by a man called Rick Berman. And please do, if you're watching and you're interested in how front groups, they're called lobbyists, create media. And I'm particularly fascinated, horrified, but also fascinated by this whole industry. There's a whole collection of people around the world who are paid by big industry, whether it's the tobacco industry in the 80s or the meat industry now in the noughties. These people are paid to create PR, whether that's articles, websites, videos, and content that is designed to look plausible, sound credible. And what it does is it misleads people. That kind of indictment against soy milk is really just a straw man. Yes, soy products and monocropping can be a huge problem in our world today, where you have swathes of land and countryside that are, forests cut down to grow soybeans. But as you rightly pointed out, most of it goes to feeding cows, and there's a minuscule amount of it.
It's 70% of it goes
almost
to
all of it.
Cows. Almost all of it.
And it's the same when it comes to sort of when people talk about like avocados or almonds. They say you vegans are destroying the rainforest, or you're destroying the world through palm oil. You vegans and your palm oil and your vegan products. Most of the palm oil goes into things like cosmetics and skincare and paint. Vegans are not responsible for the destruction of the rainforest. I would say, though, that obviously as a vegan, being vegan just simply means the food you eat doesn't contain animal products. That doesn't mean it's necessarily ethical. And this is where ethical veganism comes in. It's not a different level of veganism, but it's just a level of conscientious consumer consciousness, being a bit more of a conscious consumer. Take chocolate, for example. If you buy a vegan chocolate from the supermarket, it might be free of animal products, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's ethical. The cocoa beans may have been picked by children in North Africa. So that is something that you probably wouldn't want to buy into or invest in. So maybe always look out for the fair trade logos on your chocolate. So, and that can apply to all kinds of different things, from almonds to cocos to coconuts. Coconuts can be picked by monkeys in Thailand, where animals are being exploited, but you wouldn't assume that the animals are being exploited unless you actually did your research.
Absolutely. And I've been reading a lot about that and been contacted by companies that say, please do a story on me. We're not one of those coconut companies. And I'm in the process. And if you want to beat me to it, I'm perfectly happy to let you do that, since I'm overwhelmed with projects, is trying to figure out which companies are the ones that are certified not using monkeys to pick their coconuts, and which are the ones that are the bad guys in essence. So I'm in the process of figuring that out so I can update, because I'm running out of coconut oil and I need to buy some, and I don't know which ones to buy. But yes, you're absolutely right. You could say you're a vegan and eat Oreo cookies all day. It's really, though, getting back to the dairy. The dairy is one of the most pernicious substances. Again, unnatural. We're not cows. We don't need to drink the breast milk of a cow. And B, it's designed to fatten up baby calves to hundreds of pounds. And it has the same impact on humans to a large degree. That's why 2/3 of Americans are overweight or obese. And additionally, these animals are fed with so many antibiotics, otherwise they would collapse from the horrible conditions. And sometimes they do collapse. Those are called downer cows. And there's been a lot of undercover investigations about those. So a lot of times those hormones, they go right into people. So you've got so many reasons. And then, of course, the fact that animal agriculture is such a huge contributor to climate change. And I'm really glad you did the article on Dr. Silas Rao's white paper showing that animal agriculture is responsible for more than 3/4 of greenhouse gas emissions, something that the mainstream media has not acknowledged yet. And you can read that at climatehealers.org. You can see the entire white paper and read it and decide for yourself. There's citations. The UN FAO is purposely dialing back the impact of methane, which primarily comes to a large degree from animal agriculture, by miscalculating its impact, by calculating it over 100 years, when it degrades after about a decade. So that is like eating a chocolate cake in one day and calculating its impact on your body over 100 years. Of course, it's not going to have such impact. So they're playing games because really the moment that human beings wake up to the fact that a huge amount of California is on fire right now, that it hit 130 degrees in Death Valley, that it's too hot to go outside. And I'm right here at the beach. Imagine what it's like in Arizona. If people are baking, the immigration crisis is to a large degree people fleeing because their climates are no longer temperate. They can't be subsistence farmers that just grow their own crops and eat them anymore because it's either drought or high winds or heavy, intense rains. So we're destroying our planet right now because of animal agriculture. And I want to ask you this, Robbie, because, we figured it out. I'm not a Rhodes Scholar. Why is it that these Rhodes Scholars, the best and the brightest, which was a sarcastic title, can't connect the dots that if we're 7.8 billion humans raising, torturing, and killing 70 plus billion cows, pigs, chickens, turkeys, and goats who eat a lot more than they produce as food every year, that they're eating most of the food we grow, that they're responsible for most of the land we kill to give them grazing land, that this is the big problem. Why can't they get this simple calculation?
It's a really good question. I've asked myself this every day. Why are more people not waking up to the reality that the food we eat is causing huge amounts of damage to our world? And I think for me, it comes down to education. When it comes to the same reason that people often ask, why do doctors not understand nutrition? They're simply not trained in these areas. I think when it comes to the environmental movement, more and more specialists and scientists are waking up to this idea. Take Greenpeace, for example. It's only up until recently that Greenpeace, a global environmental organization, has finally started to talk about the impact of diet on our environment. I think in previous decades, a lot of organizations and individuals have been too afraid to talk about diet because it involves an individual's choice, personal choice. And people don't want to go there because they don't want to come across as being part of a totalitarian state, telling people how to live, what to eat. But there's a great analogy in the film Cowspiracy. And if you haven't seen Cowspiracy, please watch it.
Oh, yeah.
There is two people in their homes. One man's watering his garden, and the other man is in his garden watching the other man watering his garden. The man watering his garden is pouring water everywhere, spraying his plants, and going about his day. Now, at what point would you say something to your neighbor if the water from his garden started to enter yours, and to the point where it began to flood everything in your garden, wash away all your flowers and your vegetables in your garden? This is the same analogy when it comes to our world. Our neighbors and the people around us who consume animal products, they may think that they're doing this in isolation, that it doesn't affect anybody else. It's my personal choice. But the reality is it's 7.8 billion people thinking like I'm only one person. If we're all thinking like that in a very selfish, self-centered way, it leads us to this kind of scenario where we're in a world where people don't realize that everything they do, every purchase, every piece of food they put in their mouth has a cumulative effect on our world. And I think when we start to educate and enlighten people about this, that the milk we consume requires vast amounts of water. It produces vast amounts of CO2. The soybeans that are required to feed the cows so that they can produce the milk requires huge amounts of more land to cut down. And as more and more people are born on Earth, and as our population, which has tripled in the last 40 years to 7.8 billion, there's going to be a requirement for more land. And where are we going to put all these cows? How are we going to sustain it? So I think the writing is on the wall. We just have to keep educating people. But it is a battle because we're up against huge multi-billion-dollar industries who want to keep people eating cheese and milk and consuming animal products. It's a game of Samson and Goliath, and we just have to keep at it and keep educating people using social media and working with journalists and the media to try and push the message as far and wide as possible.
Yes, so eloquent, so well said. And even those meat companies, which are like a big six, and one is owned by the Chinese, one's owned by the Brazilians, they know that the writing's on the wall. They're just trying to ride that meat and dairy wave as long as they can. Meanwhile, JB, has just come up with a whole vegan line. JBS is the Brazilian company. It's one of the largest, if not the largest, meat producers in the world. Came up with a whole line of certified vegan products that my friend Carissa Krantz, who runs a vegan certification company, said she's vegan from birth. She said she almost couldn't eat it because it's so meat-like. It tastes so much exactly like meat that it was just hard for her as a vegan to even eat it, to taste it. And so if you can create something that looks and tastes exactly like an animal product that has zero cholesterol, which is leading to heart disease, which is another leading killer, why wouldn't these companies make the switch? Well, let me use the example of the American car industry. They had created an electric car back in the 90s. There's a great documentary, Who Killed the Electric Car. They decided they just didn't want to have to change. They were making money. They were just concerned about the next quarter, short-sighted, and they killed the electric car. They literally took it from people. And I know a couple of the people they took it from. They talk about it, and they made a documentary of them literally grabbing the cars from people who were fighting them to keep their electric cars. They destroyed them. And the executive, the American automotive executive who made that decision, said it was the worst. He later said it was the worst decision of his life, his biggest regret. Now look at Tesla. We had to wait 30 years, okay, for that, when we could have been there 30 years ago. And look at all the gas and all the CO2 that happened as a result of that. You know, if I could say one thing to these meat companies, because I know they watch us. I was just written up in a pork magazine and in an animal farming magazine as a demon.
A heretic.
Yeah, I would just say, you know, when, like they say in Wall Street, if you're going to panic, panic early, panic first. You know, this is going to change. And whichever meat company abandons that old model and restructures and comes out, we know Tyson invested in Beyond Meat, and they're interested in that space too. We know the Chinese government, which is now the Chinese conglomerate owns Smithfield, but we know the Chinese government has seen the handwriting on the wall. They want to reduce meat consumption by 50%. The problem is that what I've heard is some people within the government infrastructure have investments in the meat industry. So there's probably internal conflict there. It's always about the money. When you see this industry, it's really just about the money. And I think that if consumers could just take the power back and start boycotting meat. And I got to tell you, last thing, I know we veered off a little bit of the dairy, but we've got a boycott meat campaign that is happening here in the United States because of the slaughterhouse workers dying of COVID, which is happening all over the world. The slaughterhouse workers are getting wiped out. So for an obvious in solidarity with these poor workers, overwhelmingly people of color who are forced in there to, because they call it an essential product, which it's not, to work and die to make a chicken wing so somebody can eat that, even though it's not necessary, it's not essential. So there is, I think COVID has really accelerated our movement. That's my last question to you, Robbie.
Has it accelerated the movement? Absolutely. I think this pandemic has woken a lot of people up to the reality of animal agriculture, and the media has been awash with stories. You know, Plant-Based News has been covering it a lot about the impact of farming animals in this way. And I think that if we don't start shifting away from animal agriculture, we will see more pandemics in quick succession. We've obviously had pandemics many times over the last few centuries, but I think they will occur closer and closer together. And obviously, you know, they're a little bit like comets hitting the Earth. You know, if they happen once every 100 years, we can recover. But if we have multiple viruses in circulation through human society, it will absolutely decimate our society. You know, the COVID virus, the SARS-2 COVID virus, COVID-19, it's pretty mild in comparison to what could come down the chute from any one of these factory farms. So I think anyone who is listening, who is on the fence about, getting involved in vegan advocacy, now's the time really to support the movement and to support the conversation around ending animal agriculture. There's so many wonderful alternatives. We know without a shadow of a doubt that humans can live and thrive on a whole food, plant-based diet, and that many forms of disease can be reduced or even reversed in the cases of type 2 diabetes, which affects millions of Americans and people all over the world. So I think, now is the time. There's never been a better time to try and shift away from meat.
Well, I just love everything you're doing, Plant-Based News. I would wish I could fly to London and visit you in person, but this is the next best thing. So once again, everybody, let's support this incredible project. The future is dairy-free. There's a 7-day dairy-free challenge, but the truth is you can sign up at any time. All you need to do is go to worldplantmilkday.com, worldplantmilkday.com, sign up, and send this out to your friends who are what I'd call pre-vegans.
Yeah.
Who really
Vegetarians.
Vegetarians, yes, exactly.
Meat reducers.
Yes, exactly. Love you. Say hi to Klaus. And
thanks so much for having us.
Keep it up.